Welcome to the Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives of the lower Laguna Madre. With this episode being the debut, I wanted to make this episode a special one. Today's guest is known very well in the fly fishing world. He has spent 25 years as a full-time guide out of the lower Laguna Madre and is one of the best, if not the best, fly caster to ever come out of South Texas. I hope you'll enjoy my episode with a dear friend of mine and a mentor to me, Captain Rick Hartman. Okay, I want to start this episode with a preface. This story that I'm about to tell starts in May of 2022. It was me. I was fishing with someone who's a little bit more well-known in the fishing community. And for those who don't know for those who have any sort of idea of who this person is, his name is Jay Watkins. And it was just a regular fishing day. And he had asked me a lot about where I started fly fishing, who I was fly fishing with. And, one of the things that I told him was that I was someone who had gone to fish a lot with you. And whatever, the day ends. Next day, first thing Jay Watkins tells me is, I'm sorry that I didn't know who Rick Hartman was. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes basically that he went to the fly shop the next day, that afternoon. And he brought your name up, and essentially they couldn't stop talking about the quote unquote legend of Rick Hartman. So hold on. So I want to start this with, in your own personal idea or in your own personal belief, how did the legend of Rick Hartman begin?
There's no legend that probably, unless you start putting a negative connotation to legend. No, I kind of got into the fly fishing thing from a backwards end, as far as anything I'm known for at all. I think it came more from casting, believe it or not, than actually fishing. I've always fished, and I enjoyed fly fishing, and just out of weird circumstances, I decided to start guiding a little bit part-time back in the maybe mid 90s, and decided, hey, kind of quit what I was doing as a full-time job and said, what the hell, I'll try this full time. Mm-hmm. And, that's not really an easy transformation. It was hard to get business at that time or get your name out there. And I know a lot of people that, they were good at advertising or good at marketing, and, that's never really been something that I was good at, or getting out and saying, man, I'm really awesome at this, or I'm really good. You need to come fish with me. And I just, started doing, casting tournaments, which ended up being a lot of the times at fly fishing shows or tackle shows. And, that's kind of how I went about building my business, is hitting some of those shows that had casting tournaments and getting just crushed, not doing very well at the first couple of tournaments I went to. It was actually pretty funny because I run into people down here, or some reps. When I used to work at Bud Rowland's fly shop a long time ago, I'd run into reps, and they would tell me that, man, you're good at casting. There's tournaments that you should go try. And I was like, wow, man, I'm going to go there and do really well. And instead I went there, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not very good. And so I just practiced almost, literally 2 hours a day for just years. And then when I was going back to a lot of those shows around the country, You know, it win some, win some of those tournaments. Then you start meeting people more, and they wanted to come up and ask you questions and talk to you, and find out, oh wow, he guides and for redfish, and that's kind of how I built my customer base. It really wasn't my plan. That's just how it happened. So I think, all in all, for a long time, I was known more as this guy that can throw a weight forward fly line a long ways, more so than a redfish guide. And that slowly kind of morphed into maybe 50-50. And then as I've gotten older, and the tournaments kind of have gone away. There's not many of them out there anymore, and so I don't really mess with it too much. It's kind of just morphed even further into, okay, he's a just guides for redfish down there, but certainly no legend involved in any of that. But it was just interesting at first that, if you plugged my name in or talked to people, it wasn't, oh yeah, we're the fly fishing guide in Texas. It was always related to casting, or some of the shows I'd done, what is the Outdoor Life Network, I guess, and ESPN shows and stuff. It was more for that than it was for actually pulling a skiff down in South Texas for redfish. And that slowly seems to have changed over the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's such an interesting concept that there used to be such, I guess, I don't want to say vigor, but just such an emphasis on the technique and the fly casting, especially in North America, because in Europe we still see that a lot. And
yeah, it's enormous over there.
Yeah, which I don't understand. I don't understand where the hype came from in Europe, because they do mostly streams. They don't really do a lot of long casting from what I understand. But how did a fly rod first make it into your hand?
Just really kind of by accident. I mean, there wasn't really many people down here that I knew that did it a lot when I was in, say junior high school age. And I just kind of piddled around with it. I mean, originally it was just older family members that got me into fishing. My dad really didn't fish hardly at all. He just kind of always bought really, really bad bay boats that did not run shallow. And, so that's kind of what I used back in junior high and high school, and hit every sandbar down here. And it was not pretty, but and just really, I knew I always were using spinning rods, and the fly rod thing was just kind of an accidental. And to be honest with you, I'd mostly used it in lakes and streams, and really didn't have a clue that was a tool for salt water, probably until more like late high school, maybe mid high school, late high school. And even then, it still really wasn't that serious about it. So yeah, I mean, just nobody said, hey man, here's this great sport. You need to get involved with saltwater fly fishing. There was no one to show me. And, it was interesting that, I don't even know when it was. It was probably late in my high school years, maybe, late 80s, maybe. I used to drive the back way to South Bay, and we didn't have a boat at that time, and it wouldn't have mattered. The ones my dad would always have would have not made it anyways. I would walk the back way in the South Bay through all the oysters, and be, just out there playing around with the fly rod, catching a few redfish here and there. And it was funny, really. The first person that I met down here that was really into the fly fishing deal was old Bud Rowland. Just pulled up to me one day in that ugly old Dargle scooter that he had with that built up tower, this peach looking thing, and typical Bud Rowland fashion, man, he pulled right up to me and goes, "Hey, you fly fishing?" I was like, "Well, duh," I was, and and he goes, "Well, man, hop on. I'm Bud Rowland. Let's I'll take you fishing." And that, in all honesty, that's probably where I started being able to get more serious about it and understand more of it, and even get to see things I'd never seen before, uh, from a boat. I was just, yeah. And so I would think that probably he would be the very first person that just like influenced me or showed me, hey man, look, there's way more that you can do than just this little spot here. And I think that was kind of the start of it, was accidentally running into him when I was out there walking around. And then then they opened a fly shop a little bit later there on the island, that David Losey had there, and I got the pleasure of obviously meeting Eric Glass. That was a big deal, and he was already into it, and golly, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would say that's my main memories of where it really started. I mean, not just, I know what a fly rod is. Yeah, I catch a fish on a fly rod, or yeah, I've caught a few redfish. But when it really took hold for whatever reason, I remember that particular point, going, wow, man, this is, man, you can stand on a boat and man, you can, if you throw far enough, you can reach these fish. This is pretty cool. And I think at that point, I'm not too sure I ever even really wanted to throw a spinning rod again after that. So anyhow, yeah, that's, I don't have anything in particular as far as, when I was a kid, I remember my grandpa putting this fly rod. Not really. Just, I just kind of piddled in farm ponds or whatever, with, old friends of mine, Matt Thornton, when we were kids, farm ponds on deer leases and stuff. And but I don't think that was anything real life changing at that point. It was just kind of interesting to throw a fly rod. But yeah, I think, that time in South Bay, I'll never forget that. That seems to be when all of a sudden the light switch went on and went, man, this could go a whole nother direction. And yeah, it was. I would say probably then, I guess that was, I don't know, maybe 87, maybe 1987, maybe 88. I'm not sure, but that's that sounds about right.
And so from that point, that day in South Bay, how long did it take from obviously from that point till when you were doing your 2-hour casting sessions?
That was a while. That was still, probably 2 to 3 years, maybe. I apparently I didn't realize that I even could throw a fly rod really anything different than anybody else. It was just kind of by accident that when I was working with at Bud's shop there in Mission, there was a sage rep, hell of a guy named Kerry Marcus, and he just out of the blue was the one that was like, I was actually teaching some people out in the field about casting, and he just mentioned he was the very first person that said, man, you're seen some casters, you're really good. There's some tournaments out there you ought to try. And I think at that point I practiced a little harder, had my head built up like I knew what I was doing, and clearly I did not. So I went to the first, I don't remember when the first tournament I went to was, exactly which year, but I do remember how badly I performed, maybe, under pressure as well. I don't do well under pressure when it comes to casting, but anyways, that's another story. Yeah, there's a guy named Steve Ray Jeff, Tim Ray Jeff, anybody that has ever held a fly rod knows who those guys are. And then there was another guy by the name of Jim Gunderson and Lance Egan, that in all honesty, at that time, when I first tried that game, I would say Jimmy Gunderson and Lance Egan, as far as the weight forward fly line game, were just really, really a good bit better than everybody else. And the only thing I did right was analyze what the hell was making them better than other people. And so that's what I had to figure out. And I think really when I started, I immediately after that deal, I was like, okay, I got to figure this whole game out. And so that's when I started, doing this 2-hour practice session in the city of Harlingen, allowed me to use a indoor roller hockey rink.
How did you get that?
Well, the head of Parks and Recreation, God, man, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, kind of on the down low, allowed me to get in there. At first, I would show up when they were having like a hockey league, and then I would wait till they left, and they would just say, okay, lock up when you're done. And then the head of the Parks and Recreation here in Harlingen eventually just gave me the key, and then later a lock combination, and just was like, hey, you can go in there and utilize it. And so at nighttime, after I was done on the water, or when I wasn't on the water, either way, for some reason I liked nighttime. I could go in there and the whole place was lit up when you turned the lights on. And man, every single night, drove my wife nuts. I would just go over there and just beat myself senseless and try different things. And yeah, I mean, actually, now that I look back on it, it was actually a pretty good time. But by yourself the whole time. So I guess it was a little bit of an antisocial event, but no, I enjoyed it. I kind of miss it, to tell you the truth.
So how are you doing these practices?
How?
Yeah. So like, is there any, like, I'm sure I remember you telling me about like hoops and stuff like that, but I know that, like, I don't want to drop any like spoilers, but I know that later on in some of the tournaments, you guys started doing like moving targets. And so like,
yeah.
how are you preparing for all these different like endeavors?
Well, there's the original ones were pretty cut and dry. I mean, it's if you have an accuracy game, you obviously are throwing at hoops and so I mean, obviously for practicing for that, it's pretty simple. It was funny. There was actually red dots painted on the floor of this hockey rink that were about 24 inches wide, which is I have no idea why they were there. And I would just move around and walk around at any distance and work on those for a while. But mostly I would work on the distance, mainly because the same technical issues that cause problems in your distance casting are the exact same thing that causes problems with accuracy. And thus the things that fix those problems in distance also fix the problems with accuracy. And so, yeah, I just, I screwed things up, turned around, tore them apart, started over again. And, I just kept trying to figure out how to, throw further and further. So tracking became involved. 180-degree casting style is what I think Paul Arden from Sexy Loops is probably the first one to throw that term out there of what I was doing. That just kind of came around, and And yeah, I mean, I can't say that there was any one thing that I would say, okay, this is what I got to practice on. I just every night would go in, and I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, does it go X amount of distance, and does it straighten out?
Mm-hmm.
And then if, once you can accomplish that at longer distances, the same sort of applies to the accuracy, but obviously your stroke is much shorter, and there's some differences, but in all honesty, as silly as it sounds, and not probably the smartest way to go about it. I can't say that I ever walked in there and said, this is exactly what I have to concentrate on tonight. I think it was more of I just show up and pound it out and take a look at the good and the bad, and, and concentrate on what was good.
So you were just teaching yourself the whole time?
Well, I mean, there really wasn't many options. Most of the stuff at that time was, 10 and 2, put a Bible under your elbow and go from there. And, which is, don't get me wrong, that's very helpful, things to, when you're to beginner casters. But, yeah, I mean, I had to teach myself. I mean, there just really wasn't anybody down here. And then if there was, and you talk to them about casting, it was rather, well, I catch fish, and that's the only reason I need to throw that fly out there is to catch a fish. And, so, if you talk to somebody, well, I want to throw further, or I want to do this, there really wasn't anybody to talk to about that. And, I didn't know, I got to know Jimmy Gunderson, Lance Egan, and Steve Ray Jeff, pretty well a little later on. But at that point, it was just, yeah, you just gotta teach yourself. And boy, did I get to find out all the mistakes you could possibly make. And I will say this, that when you yourself create the mistakes, you will learn from that better than somebody telling you, don't do this. It's just like any kid. You can tell them, don't stick that pin in a light socket. Don't do that. And, you can tell them 100 times, and they're still going to do it. But once they do it, that's the best teacher of all. So I think that it was probably good that I taught myself a lot of those things, because it really pounded it into my head better than someone just telling me, don't do that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just taught myself.
What was the biggest mistake you ever created for yourself?
Oof. As far as casting?
Absolutely.
Oh, boy. Man, oh, man, oh, man. There's so many of them. Boy, there's a lot of them. I think one of the, well, obviously everybody knows what creeping is. We won't get it. I mean, that was something, but that's just a beginner's error that everybody makes. I think I'll move that a step forward. As far as one of the ones I had the biggest problem with, that I had to work with, is in this 180 degree style. It's very easy to pull the lower leg of your loop down on your back cast, and that therefore the trajectory of your forward cast almost takes a little bit of a downward angle first before it goes forward when you're talking about a really long back cast. And so that was a big mistake for a long time that I had to figure out, how to try to fix that. And that caused me some grief for a while, because, obviously I wanted to throw a longer line, throw a longer back cast. And, and so the style that I was utilizing would tend to pull the lower leg down, and thus the point of the loop, the very tip of the loop was actually very tight. But the style that I was working with tended to open up the loop in the middle of say at 40 feet, rather than, let's just say you're holding 80 feet of line. Mm-hmm. Loop looks great, but at 40 feet and closer to you, the loop's wider than it should be, even though the leading edge of the loop was tight, pointed, if you will. So yeah, that was something that I had to sit there and mess around with for a long time. and try to, because it definitely caused some problems. And, that was also something that some very, very people that I consider educated casters, great casters, when I was at shows and stuff would point out, and which they found curious. This is like, why does it go the distance it does when it's doing that? And that was a question that I was like, okay, why does it do that, and how to correct it? But anyhow, that's probably a little more advanced than people care to care about.
Personally, I think that's I love talking about like the technicals. Whenever I get to fish with you, listening to you talk about the physics behind the fly rod, what your arms are doing, the loop, how it's shaped and stuff, to me is probably some of the most interesting things I've ever heard anybody say on a skiff. So from those practice sessions, I'm interested to know, how long did it take for you to start, I guess, getting recognized at tournaments? Like, oh, that's Rick Hartman. He's gonna absolutely blow the competition right now.
It was funny. It had nothing to do with winning a tournament. Okay. You know what I'm best known for? Choking. There's a buddy of my there's a buddy of my Brian O'Keefe that I became pretty good friends with, and people. Another one that whom I think the world of, a guy named Randy Swisher. He and a few other people, I'd be practicing, and they would see, when we're out there messing around, when it's not in competition, they would see what I was throwing distances wise and be like, oh, what the heck? But then it's funny when you get on that platform, as goofy as it sounds, the pressure of like, oh man, you got to throw this one the long way. I kid you not, I probably would drop. I don't think I ever threw anywhere close to what I threw in practice. Yeah, even when I won those competitions, I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, I would consistently just freaking choke it up and just drop at least 12 to 15 feet less distance than what I would throw when I was practicing and relaxing. And my buddies it just got to be a running joke in those competitions, with Brian and Randy and eventually Steve too. I mean, it was just kind of comical because it's like, for whatever reason, man, too much pressure or whatever the hell, I'd be a horrible golfer. I mean, anything that would require finite skills that would put pressure on you, I would just be horrible at it. And it was the same thing with casting. It was hilarious because, I mean, I could sit out there and just bomb away the whole time. But the minute I had to do it under pressure for a competition, I mean, I was definitely going to drop at least 12 to 15 feet. It's hilarious. I mean, even when the ones that I never threw a good casting competition, even the ones that I won, not even close. Yeah, it was a big running joke. But yeah, Brian O'Keefe was the one that made the biggest fun of me, man. He poked, oh man, it was pretty comical.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I now that you said that, I do remember you definitely bringing that up. What were you throwing on average when you were practicing with these guys?
It depends on elevation. When we were saying Salt Lake City or in Denver, just out there, screwing around, I was, probably pretty dadgum consistent in the mid 130s to maybe even a little higher than that. But again, just out playing, having it, we're just practicing this and that. And then that's at high elevation. You can't pull that off down, at low elevation.
What's the big difference in elevation?
Just thin air. The line travels further. So down here, I could mid to high 120s was about right when I was practicing. And man, you go at Salt Lake City or Denver, it's an automatic 8 to 10 feet, just because of the thin air. And I couldn't even there was just no way that tensed up and pressure. And then the other problem is you get a guy that, I work out. And so now if you got muscles that are tensing up that that's just not a good combination to stay loose. And so it's like I probably needed to do yoga or Pilates and stuff or something before I would compete. But yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair statement at the high elevation. Pretty much mid 130s to maybe every now and then high 130s. With the standard gear that they were using, an off the shelf 5-weight with an off the shelf, 5-weight floating line. Now, I know nowadays things have changed. You can kind of use whatever rods you want and throw the 5-weight with it, which changes the game considerably. But that's, I'm this stuff is all antiquated now that we're talking about. I mean, things have definitely changed since then, and they don't really hold the same competitions much anymore.
Can you describe the atmosphere of what it was like to step on the platform?
For me, it was horrible. But I didn't mind doing seminars. That was fine, no problem. I enjoyed talking in front of people. I enjoyed talking to people. I don't know. I have no explanation for that at all. It was like, man, what happened to my right hand? I can't feel it. I mean, it was just really, really bizarre. I mean, I don't know if the heart rate goes up too high. I don't know what, but it's like, man, my right hand does not do what my brain wants it to do. And it was funny, man. I mean, everything I would tell people that you don't want to do, I would do. I mean, the only reason that I even did well at all is probably because I was an idiot and spent way more time practicing than anybody else would ever even dream of. While people were spending time doing stuff that was, smart or, maybe getting a third degree or learning a different language or something. No, I was spending 2 hours throwing a fly rod. And so the only reason that, I would able to throw some decent casts off that platform was because somehow my body took over a little bit on a few of them. But yeah, I don't know what happened. As soon as you said it was a competition that I needed to throw one to win, I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, I lost the use of my right side since I'm right-handed.
And so from that point, how long did it take for you to get involved with the traveling for fishing and all the other stuff?
It kind of happened almost immediately. It was really interesting. I kind of got involved a little bit with Under Armour by accident. I just won a couple competitions and then got involved with some of these ESPN, the Great Outdoor Games and things like that. And, and then like I mentioned before, one of the best things that ever happened to me was meeting Brian O'Keefe and another, he's an exceptional photographer, probably one of, if not the best, but then I met another exceptional photographer that would be arguably, just as amazing, Brian Grossenbacher. And, they would call and say, hey man, I need an angler. I think it's kind of funny because they assumed that I could throw a fly rod in competition. That must mean I could fish. And I don't know how that's debatable, but so they would, say, hey, we're going to fly here and do photo ops and this and that. And then, like I said, the accidental thing with the sponsorship or, with Under Armour, that was kind of cool because they would just, say, hey, we're going to go do photo shoot here or there or whatever. And you get to go, do some fishing. And then I got to meet some incredible people who, whom I was just at a show in Dallas with, guy involved with Under Armour, Kobe Fulks, and a guy that was part of the ESPN Great Outdoor Games, Steve Bouchard. And, so from the Under Armour thing, it ended up being, the Jackson 01 fly, get to go do that stuff. Just things that in all honesty, I would have never have gotten to do if it wasn't for the casting.
The choking.
The choking. Yeah, I mean, I really don't. I mean, the Under Armour thing was kind of weird. We won't get into that too much. That's a pretty funny story how that even began. It really was pure accident. But I also come to find out that, well, anyhow, well, that's another story. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh yeah, I got to go some crazy places with Brian O'Keefe and some fun stuff but experiences that I honestly, I will never forget, and that's one of the it's just stuff that when here you are getting older, some of those things you look back on very fondly of and think, man, that's maybe the casting was in one degree a waste of time. But on the other hand, it was not a waste of time. I mean, there were some really, really neat things that came from it. And I got to meet some of the most amazing people. To this day, I still think are some of the best people I've had the pleasure of meeting. And so, on that hand, it was the time spent was worth it.
Absolutely. Which one of the places that you traveled to when you were doing these photo shoots with Brian and whatnot, which one of these was like the most impactful on you, or one that like made you realize it really was worth it and it wasn't actually a waste of time?
Oh, I don't think there was really, honestly, I don't think it was a travel destination. I think it was just meeting some of the greatest people. I mean, just fine people within the industry. I think has been the biggest impact. It's not really a destination. I mean, it's like I said, Brian is just one of the finest people you could ever want to meet, and an extraordinary fisherman. And obviously, everybody knows photographer. But I mean, guys like Steve, who, my gosh, I mean, by far, there will never be, well, maybe there will be someday, but there'll never be anybody in our lifetime that can do what he can do with a fishing rod in his hands. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, he is just freaking extraordinary. I got the pleasure of meeting him, being able to bend his ear a little bit. Like I said, my buddies of mine, the guys at Under Armour that are no longer there, but they were, and they got to become friends. And there's so many, just places that I got to go because of them. And it's all been amazing just simply because of the people I got to meet. I mean, fishing was kind of more of a side note. It's an interesting trip with Brian O'Keefe was down to Guadalupe. I mean, I don't know if I'd call that impactful, other than the food was horrible. That was pretty impactful for many reasons. And then there was a drink there called tea punch. It was made with rum that they made there in Guadalupe. That did not have a real good impact. But that was an interesting trip. Of a lot of the trips I've taken, that was just kind of an untapped kind of place to fish at that time, and that was pretty unique. But I mean, most of the other stuff, hey, it's just fishing. I mean, I don't know. It's I can't say that the actual fishing part ever made really an impact. I think it was more maybe the locations or some of the people that you meet, or oh god, some of the animals you see. Man, oh boy.
Elaborate.
Oh man. Oh my gosh. So I don't know why I remember this. This is pretty bad. We were down at in Guadalupe, and the guide it was the only dang person on the whole freaking island that spoke any English at all. Obviously everybody spoke French, and he'd broken English, but good enough to where he'd get along. I mean, I'm horrible with any other kind of language. In English, I kind of understand Spanish, which is a shame. But we were trying to go to this spot, and they were running through this mud puddle that looked pretty rough. And, the guy started slowing down, and Brian and I were screaming, "No, don't slow down, don't slow down." And anyways, he slowed down. We got stuck, bigger than Dallas. And you'll see where this story's going. This part of it's worthless for the end game. But so we're sitting there stuck, and we were laughing, taking photos, trying to push this vehicle out of there, just rolling in mud. And this little lady pulled up, and I believe it was a Ford Ranger or the likes, but I think it might have been a Ford Ranger. And she pulled up to us and, turned the truck around. It had a hitch on back, and she said she could help us. And, and our guide asked her, "Do you have any rope?" And she pulls out this stuff that, I kid you not, look like knitting yarn. And we started laughing with that. What the hell are we going to do with this? And so I think multiple times we took this, like, I'm not kidding you, it was like knitting yarn. Mm-hmm. We sat and braided this stuff for like 20, 30 minutes at a time to hook it to the back of her vehicle and put it onto his 4-wheel drive. And obviously the first time it broke. So we spent another 30 minutes, maybe 40, trying to braid this stuff again into another rope. It did work the second time. But anyways, I guess where I was going with this is I remember that once we finally got pulled out, we were all kind of laughing, and we drove by, and there was this bull standing in just, what a bull does. He just stands there in the grass. But this bull had testicles that literally were 3 inches from the ground. And we were all laughing so hard that we had to get out and start taking photos of it. But we were all laughing so hard you couldn't even hold the camera straight, because every time he would try to move, he would kick his own nuts. And they would just start swinging all over the place. I never seen anything like it. I mean, I was like, what? I mean, I don't know if this was like a special Guadalupean bull. I mean, it was the damnedest thing I have ever seen. And then anyways, I think what was so funny is there was a little car parked just down from us, maybe, 50, 75 feet. And these people were dying laughing, clearly doing the same thing we were doing, because they couldn't believe it. And oddly enough, they were the only Americans that we ran into the whole damn time we were down there. Then we heard them speak in perfect English, and they were college students down there, and taking photos and laughing at the same thing. I mean, that's probably one of the things I remember most is the length of the balls on that bull. Maybe 3.5 feet. I don't know. It was. I mean, it was funny as hell. I mean, Bull probably didn't think so, but my God, we were just dying laughing. Poor Bull couldn't even walk, man. I mean, every time he walked, he kicked his own nuts. It was unbelievable. But anyways, that's where that's the animal thing.
I mean, I think that's hilarious. I wanna go talk about a little bit about Ray Jeff. I assume you spent more times casting against him or with him than you did when you were fishing with him, right?
I only got to fish with him a few times. I probably spent more time just messing around at shows, just playing around casting. The competition, that's so short and sweet and, done. That's just a couple throws and it's out there. But probably spent more time just watching him, dissecting what he does, which is miraculous in and of itself, if you can figure that out.
You never figured it out?
Well, you can on slow motion video. It's just, his hand speed is just phenomenal. And it's almost, I don't know that it can be replicated. I mean, probably can by somebody, but sure as hell not by me. I mean, I couldn't. The stroke that he uses, I couldn't pull off. Not to the distances that he got out of it. But no, I think I got to spend maybe a little more time. Like we just be at shows and we just go up on the platform, just screwing around and just start bombing away as far as we could, just for fun. And or I got to spend some time just, a couple times we'd just be out eating, stuff like that, having dinners, and just, an amazing individual, just a wealth of knowledge. And again, God, an amazing angler, with the few times I got to spend time with him on the boat, just a tremendous angler.
What set him apart from, not an average, but like your common solid angler that you got to fish with?
Okay, one more time on the question.
Like, what set him apart? What made him more fishy than someone who's like, than someone like me, if you will?
He had never, like, for instance, one story, he had never even seen a trout. I mean, let me rephrase that. I'm sure he'd seen a trout, but he clearly had never like gone fishing for him. And I didn't realize this, but at the end of the story is when I figured it out. But I'll never forget this. We were sitting with I think it was Larry Allen was with us. Steve had come down to Port Mansfield, and he and Larry Allen were on my boat, and we were back in this area, and there was very, very large trout swimming dead away, and it was pretty far. I mean, I would guess when I saw it, maybe 80, 90 feet, but going away.
Mm-hmm.
And, Steve was looking and he didn't quite pick it up at first, and, but then she took a slight turn to the left and he immediately was like, yeah, I got it. And he said, well, where do you want it? And I was like, well, maybe, just foot two in front of her and maybe a little bit beyond her. So, when it sinks, it's in front of her. And he made one back cast and just bombed it, and bombed it by meaning through a long cast. I didn't mean he screwed it up. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, my God, he's going to overshoot her. And he checked it, and that thing just floated down right in front of her. And I mean, you could see that fly just disappear when she opened her mouth at from over 100 feet. And anyways, I guess what I was saying, he probably hadn't done a ton of trout fishing, because I don't even know we got an exact measurement on her, but she was, over 30 inches, well, by a good bit. Mm-hmm. And, he just looked up and he was like, oh, so is this a big one? And, you're like, oh, yeah, that's probably the biggest one I've ever had caught on my boat at that point. And so I guess back to what, makes him a good angler. I mean, obviously he has great eyes. He has fish sense. He's a hell of a trout fisherman too, and a hell of a steelhead fisherman. So he just kind of done it all, But I think when you throw the factor that he can put a cast precisely where it needs to be at any moment with one back cast, that distance, that pretty much sets him apart from the average angler on my boat. And I would say that even more than just sets him apart, that's a whole nother, I mean, that's 500% of the average angler I get on my boat. I mean, it's very efficient, very quick, just very intuitive, everything, just boom, right there, done. And that's what I find amazing when I see that in anybody, because I don't see that very often. But yeah, he was man, it was impressive, really impressive.
To basically pull that off, I assume he had to have at least like 20, 30 feet outside of the rod tip before he started casting to do 90 in one back cast.
Well, yeah, I mean, like for instance, if he's holding the fly, drops it. You can roll cast. I mean, you make a quick roll cast forward. And you slip some line into that forward roll cast, and then when you make your back cast, someone's as good as Steve. You're going to slip probably 20 feet into that back cast. So technically speaking, it's not just the line he's got out the tip. That changes real quickly without even noticing. So let's say he's holding the fly line and he's keeping, I don't know, 25, 30 feet out the tip. Drop the fly, rolls it forward once. You slip 10 feet into that long enough to really make get some speed on your back cast and load the rod and slip, X amount of line into that. And now, you can knock out a 90, 100-foot cast pretty easily on one back cast. So technically, I guess you could say the roll cast forward might count as something, but pretty much, just one back cast.
So I take it Steve was probably the best angler you've had on the front of your boat.
I would. He's
or is there someone who's a close second?
Brian O'Keefe would probably be just pretty much as good. Yeah.
Okay.
Brian he's a stick, man. He is a stick. And everyone knows him as, the photographer, but man, oh man, he can, it's a one and done deal with him too.
So those are the top two anglers you've had on the skiff. Who was the luckiest person you've ever had on the skiff? And I mean lucky by, it doesn't have to be someone who knows what they're doing. It can be someone who's completely new to the game, but someone who made the shot that they're not supposed to make.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I mean, that happens all the time. I've got guys that are lucky that, not because they caught a fish, but just because it seems like every time they show up, the fishing is either exceptional or something really just bizarre happens, or, we just happen to be out tarpon fishing and there's a sailfish sunning. Yeah. Right. I've got an angler like that. I don't know if I don't know if I want to mention his name or not.
It doesn't matter.
I don't know him terribly. I know him well, but I mean, he's not like a great friend or a super good friend or anything. But yeah, him in particular, I seem to think about that weird things happen when he's around. But as far as just like the strange guy that hooks a fish that shouldn't be, I don't know. Hell, I see that all the time. Unfortunately, I've seen.
Aside from me, obviously.
No. I've seen some fish commit hairy carry, and I'm just like going, what the hell just happened? Why did that fish do that? I've seen some pretty unbelievably lucky people. And the funny thing is the ones that are lucky are the ones that don't realize how lucky that they actually just got, because they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And, but I seem to get a lot of that.
And you've been guiding out here how long now?
Full time, since 98.
So
yeah, I think
25 years.
Yeah, I think full time since I think 98. Yeah, no, 98. So, yeah, and then just like a few years before that, I was kind of part time. With helping some guys out that had lodges and had some groups. I was kind of like, if I was open on the weekend stuff, I would help out. And so I tried the part-time deal a few years before that, before I made the biggest mistake of just doing it full time. In hindsight, I don't know how smart that was, but yet here we are. I'm kind of stuck with it now, I think.
So in these 25 years, do you have any experiences that you've seen, or any situations you've seen out on the water that you've realized are like truly rare or remarkable? like like we just talked about lucky anglers and how they have no idea what they just have gone through or what they have just done is pretty spectacular. But I'm talking about like days where the fishing should have been shit. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, when it should have been crap, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to just say it's, I've seen some cool things, but I wouldn't have known whether it should have been there, not been there. I mean, I'm not good enough to know one way or the other what should or shouldn't be. But I do recall some guys I guide from Montana all the time. They come down each year, and we were in this one particular area, and the fish were just being snotty bastards, and we'd caught a few, and you knew they were there. I mean, it was just, they were just kind of like all sitting, and we look up, and this northern, one of the first big ones of the year, was supposed to come in like later, and that black line was just coming at us like just hard, and it was just a little too shallow and hard bottom for me to get up with these guys. And I was like, crap. So I jump in the water, and I am pushing this boat as fast as I can, because I can't pull it as fast as I can walk it, because I had to go across this wind, and that wind was picking up bad. Mm-hmm. And when that northern hit, I mean, everybody down here knows what that's like when they see the black line, right before northern. It's freaking ugly. And anyway, so I'm in the water huffing, and that thing hits, and it just dropped to, I don't know what, just cold as hell, to where the water felt like it was a warm bath. It was so much warmer than the air temp. I mean, it had to have been dropped immediately into the 50s. And so my only concern was, how the hell are we going to get, I got to get us out of here and back to the dock. And then I'm pushing, and there's a pile of birds, forms just barely off to the right. And I'm like, no. And, get close enough, and shoot, there's a bunch of tails, And I mean, this is right when the northern hit. I mean, it just kept blowing. It's got to be blowing mid 30s, high 30s out of the north. And I was like, man, I'll be damned. So I was able to, there's no way I could pole. I mean, it was just too much. I mean, so I kind of pulled the boat upwind so they could kind of flop a little downwind shot in there and catch a fish. And I'm like, oh boy, that's lucky. And then I look over, and there's, another couple piles of birds, and then more piles of birds, and then more piles. And we probably sat in there with, I stood in the water trying to drag that boat around for probably the next 3 hours during just the nastiest, just hard northern that had just blown in. And I was just in disbelief that these birds were even, obviously disbelief that the fish were potted up like that, which is why the birds were there. But I was also surprised that the birds were staying over them with that hard of a wind. And I just could not believe that we even could, that there was even a chance in ever loving hell that you could catch a fish in that situation. But I don't remember how many we caught. It was quite a few, and that sure as hell is not normal. I would have never in a million years expected that, and even though it happened, I would still never expect it to happen again, because I had never seen it. And I'm sure I probably never will again, or tell you the truth, I don't want to see it again, because I don't want to have to do that again, if you don't mind. But it was pretty cool. I mean, it was interesting. But that's one of the things that shouldn't have, in my mind, shouldn't have happened that did. But there you go. That's exactly what I mean. I don't necessarily know what should or shouldn't happen most of the time, apparently.
Mm-hmm. And so you obviously most of the time spend most of your time looking for these redfish, right? But is there any specific fish in our fishery that you enjoy looking for, or at least attempting to go out and catch more than most? Or is it just, because I know you and I have talked about this before, and your answer normally was something along the lines of, for you personally, it's just a target. You're just out, like, you don't give a fuck. You're just going to do your thing, make the cast.
Yeah, but I mean, I do enjoy big trout. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a little more fun, knowing that you're probably not going to, even when you find them, you're probably not going to catch it. But I think that's probably more fun for me if you get someone on the boat that goes, okay, that's what I want to target.
Okay, me.
I like that. I do. I mean, but don't get me wrong. I mean, still most of the time it's just usually, hey, let's go out and catch fish. But I think that's kind of more fun. And believe it or not, I really like flounder. I think flounder are a lot of fun if you can, find them. I kind of like them angry at them, really.
I can see why. Yeah.
But the big trout are fun. It's nice. It's different. And, sometimes I kind of feel like I have something wired on the big trout deal. Although lately I don't feel like I have anything wired on it. That's for darn certain. But there's times of the year that I feel that, okay, yeah, we can go and do X, Y, Z and get a decent number of shots at big trout. And probably might even be able to catch one. But yeah, I do enjoy that.
Do you have any cool, not cool, but you have any stories on like entire days that you spent doing big trout where it was just like everything worked? Like one of those perfect days that everything just works?
No, I mean, as far as finding them,
catching them, doesn't really matter.
Man, I don't know if there is I mean, I've never had a day of finding them and catching them that was stellar. I mean, how they are big trout. If you catch one, you've had a stellar day.
That's true.
I mean, there was a lucky story. This is really old, long time ago. I don't remember when. I just remember it was in wintertime, and it was, particular area that everybody goes in the wintertime.
I wonder what that is.
Yeah, I wonder what that is when it's really, really, really low. And I just remember it was flat calm and pulled in there. And anybody who's fished knows what a herd of redfish, when the water moves, when it's flat calm, you can see it from a mile away. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's got to be a herd of redfish. Look at those herds. They're herds and herds. And we went in there that morning, and then you could see the water movement from the herds. And we got up close, and they were all trout. And I've never seen that before. I mean, just monstrous groups, these huge schools, and they were all big. And I mean, we caught quite a fair number that day. Nothing just that you go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But I mean, maybe they were not easy. But I don't know, 6 to 8 trout, but all really, big. But saw just unbelievable numbers of them. And then I bragged to the guys the next morning about what we're going to go see, because it was exact same conditions. It was flat calm, and it's like, man, wait till you guys see this. It's the most amazing thing you're ever going to see in your life. And we didn't see a single trout in there. But
that lines up really well with my many experiences fishing with you on some occasions where you do the infamous the Rick jinx.
Yep.
And it never fails. I don't think there's been a single time we've seen a tailing fish and you've been like, we're gonna catch this one, and we actually do. So I'm a huge believer in the Rick jinx. But that's fucking awesome. I know you and I we've had a couple stories with big trout, but not as many as I'd want to, just because school stuff like that never really lines up. But I still have nightmares of the one that I missed twice in a row.
Oh, you didn't miss it. She ate it. She ate the fly. You didn't miss it at all.
Feel free to describe it.
Yeah, no. She ate the fly. It was a heck of a rod tip rise on those.
2 times in a row.
Yeah. She ate it twice. I remember it well.
I mean, I still think about it a lot. Did you really ever get into tarpon fishing at all?
I'm a real wimp. when it comes to tarpon fishing. I really am.
Why is that?
It's just got to be perfect conditions, or I'm not
Oh,
touching
well, I
it.
mean, yeah, but you're running the stilt, so.
Yeah, I'm just not going to touch it. It's I think I know probably a third or less of what Eric Glass knows out there. But I won't. If it's perfect conditions, I'll do it, and usually do pretty well on those. And of course, it's perfect conditions, so yeah, you usually do pretty well. But I'm not. I'm not the hardcore guy that's going to go out in swells and go hunt them down. Not in the stilt, but I do love pulling that second sandbar and looking for them. And yeah, we usually do okay on those days, but I don't really spend that many days doing it because the weather's just it's you don't get that many days where the weather will cooperate and the swell's low enough, especially the last 2 years. I mean, I can count the days I could go out there on one hand almost and do it. I enjoy it. It's becoming more popular down here. The nice days when I go out, it's amazing. It's like there's a line of 10 skiffs, just you almost have to get in line now. And that kind of keeps me from wanting to do it as much, but I do, I don't like using a trolling motor for that. I kind of prefer to pull and it makes me wonder sometimes if that many skiffs in that small of an area, if the fish start getting a little more wary. I think that, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'd have to, get Eric's opinion on that because he would see it more than me. But yeah, I mean, it's fun. If conditions are right, I'm all in because it's not just tarpon. I mean, you never know what the hell you're going to find out there. You got some other guides that are starting to get specific boats. I do believe that Ben now has a Ponga that he's getting rigged or probably already is rigged specifically for that, and that's definitely a boat that can handle some rougher water and have the ability to get out there and do that more often. And so that it offers a lot, more than just tarpon. I mean, there's just so many things that you get into out there. Even if you only go after tarpon, you never know what you're going to see. But no, I enjoy the hell out of it. I love it. When the conditions are right, and we've had good success. When we've gone out and the conditions are right, and but yeah, it's just lately it just seems that even when it's dead calm, there's an offshore swell system out there that's bringing in some pretty, a pretty big swell. And I just am not going to take that stilt out there anything over, a foot and a half or two, because it's just not that much fun.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. It's what Ben is doing. Right before I decided to get my Chitum, I actually was talking to a guy out of Mexico, I think, about getting a 24-foot Ponga, and I was going to rig it out and everything just for that scenario. But the reason I ended up going with my skiff actually is because I felt like it could do basically all of the oceanside stuff, and then get me real skinny. So it just felt like it was a smarter option for me. But
yeah, it's definitely more broad ranged boat. I mean, I mean the Chitum. Hell, I mean, it's more than just the Chitum. There's actually a good number of skiffs, but the Chitum in particular, you can kind of bounce back and forth like a hell of a lot easier than you can in mine.
Yeah.
I mean, mine's great when it's shallow. It's probably the easiest pulling boat I've ever been on, but man, it's just not something that does everything real well. And offshore is one of them. It can get a little hairy out there with as low freeboard as it has. And you can stab a wave pretty easily. I believe, well, I won't say who, but another guide had used one with the client owned one and said that he stabbed a wave and thought, my gosh, they filled the cockpit up.
It's not even that big of a cockpit either. Yeah.
No. And it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's not I love it for the bay, but yeah, I think your boat definitely, it goes many different ways, way better than some of the other. I mean, I don't want to down talk other skiffs, but I mean,
No, I
a
mean, yeah.
lot better than the most of the other skiffs that I'm currently thinking of. Yeah, I think that would probably been a smarter move because I mean the Pong is great, and if you're gonna have two boats, fantastic. But yeah, it's a big investment, and
Hmm.
to have both of them for certain.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Eric. Through the many times we've been fishing, you've brought him up multiple times, and he's just someone that I've personally never had the chance to actually meet. But through what you've told me about him, he seems like he's quite the stellar person, the stellar angler.
Man, he's just kind of all around. I mean, he downplays his casting ability, which is crap. He is a great caster, a hell of a fisherman. Beyond being, I mean, beyond being probably the best guy down here. He's been doing it longer than anybody else. I mean, I think he's the first main. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some guides before him that did it a little bit. Wade Duncan and a few other guys, but Eric was like the one. That really went all in, and I think in many respects helped kind of set this area on the map for fly fishing, uh, and I mean, making almost a destination of it. I think part of that was, his doing. And I mean that in the best sense. No, he's a hell of an angler. Just a good guy. I hang, hit some golf balls and go have dinner occasionally. I'm pretty antisocial. So he's one of we don't, I don't do that too often, but I sure enjoy, going and hanging out with him and fishing with him. It's an absolute blast. But, I mean, as far as him as a person, he is just super, super, super good guy, unbelievably knowledgeable in a lot of different things. Not just fishing, just in a lot of areas. And but yeah, he is. I mean, shoot, he's about as good as they get, in my opinion.
Hmm. Okay. So we're kind of running on the ass end of this episode. I figure I want to talk a little bit about fly rod casting technique before we close it off. And I kind of want to start this part by asking you, what do you think is one of the biggest issues in modern fly casting, or in this glorified Instagram fly casting type deal, where I don't even know how I would explain it, but I guess just like this modern fly casting, or the new people that you get to guide with, or maybe something that like you and Eric talk about whenever y'all are hanging out.
Eric and I don't ever really talk too much about casting, really. In fact, I find that if we hang out, it's usually talking about something entirely off subject, um, than fishing or casting. But you know, I guess what I see these days um, is different. It seemed like back when I was into the casting, stuff. The people that knew what they were doing actually knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They could show you. They could back it up. They had the history. They had the time put in. The science, everything behind it. And it seems nowadays that the YouTube generation, the internet generation, they read, therefore they know, and it's impossible to. I would never want to go on any website now and really talk much or say much about casting because there's so many people that have all these opinions that in reality they can't even back up because they read something somewhere where somebody said that, and the other one read something where somebody else said that, and it all becomes a confrontational issue to show who knows better, and it's kind of weird. It's odd, and I guess really everything's gotten that way. Political, you name it. It seems like it's all gotten that way, and casting kind of got that way, and used to with Paul Arden's site, Sexy Loops, which is still a great site. Paul's one of the finest people you'll ever meet, man. I love him to death. It seemed, he used to have a chat board that I'd write on occasionally, and buddy of mine, Bill Gamble, from up the coast would also write on, and you'd have some pretty good intellectual discussions from guys that are engineers or people who would, spend a lot of their time, doing, 1,000 frames a second of casts and looking and watching and they really wanted to tear it down and figure it out. And nowadays, if you tried to go on and say anything about any of that, there would just be so many people that have all this input that honestly probably don't know which end of a fly rod to hold. When you run into them, you're like, you're kidding me. And I've actually run into some of these people. I hadn't been to a fly show in a gazillion years. And I just happened to go to one last month. Some buddies of mine are, again, I mentioned them earlier, Steve Bouchard and Kobe Folks have a rod company, Rise Fly Rods. And I went there to kind of help out as much as I could, which really isn't a lot, but it really was darn good to see him again. But it was really interesting. Bill Gamble was there. Again, he's from up the coast. He helped write, him and his father wrote the main 5 essentials for FFF fly casting instruction booklet, and phenomenal caster person, just and really just in a casting intellect, really. I mean, just all the way around. And he walked up to me at the show and he goes, "Rick, man, nobody even knows who I am now." And I think that kind of speaks a lot to where we are now. Nobody even knows anymore. I mean, I actually had a couple guys that come up to me and said, you're Rick Hartman. And I was really surprised that anybody even knew that I ever even threw a fly rod, but even then it was more of let me show you what I know type to a certain degree. And I was just like, that's, nodding my head. Okay, well, all right, that sounds.
Congratulations.
Well, no. I mean, I kind of got it, but then, I had they're like, man, I sure would like to, throw and show you. We, found a hallway that was long enough. The casting pond was, freaking 60 feet. And, lo and behold, some of these guys could not throw to save their lives. I mean, just flat out couldn't. I'm not, it was surprising to me that, back when I was doing it, man, the people that would come up and talk to you that acted like they knew what was going on, they did. They knew what was, I mean, they were good. They had spent so much time and effort and not just reading something or someone's opinion online, and they're now an expert. Like I said, the YouTube generation. I mean, I guess, you can go watch a video on how to fix a car. Now you're a mechanic, and that seems to be what I've seen lately. And maybe I'm just getting antiquated and old, and that's the way things are now. But it just seems to me that people don't really appreciate the time and effort that it takes to put into something to be at a particular level. And it seems like not just, we've kind of lost that in fly fishing and society on just about everything, not just fly fishing or casting.
I'm actually like you said that, and I started thinking to myself, I don't think I've heard of the current version of like the top caster. Obviously, you still have Ray Jeff doing his ads for G Loomis. I think the last one I saw was probably like a couple years ago, but I think it almost seems like the admiration behind the the discipline of fly casting has almost essentially
It's
evaporated.
dwindled.
Yeah,
For
in
certain.
North America,
Sure it does.
absolutely.
Sure it does.
How? Where do you think? Not where. When and how do you think that started happening? Because it seemed like
Internet, social media.
Okay, how?
100% social media.
How do you think?
People are anonymous. They don't have to show anything. They can just say it. And, it's just bizarre to me that it's become like that. It's that way with everything. I mean, let's Photoshop this so I look like this. Let's say this so I look like that. I don't actually need to do that or be that because I've already got 1 million people that see I've got 1 million likes. So I already am good. I already, they don't, we're at a generation where you don't even actually have to be anymore to be popular. You can be on one of these websites. I look and I'm like, holy crap, this person's got 5 million followers. And for what? They don't actually do anything. And there's no appreciation. It doesn't seem like anymore for someone that actually took the time to do it. It's more about the people who can speak the loudest or, or the best at marketing and stuff. And it's really an interesting deal. I think we've talked about this a little bit about, the fly rod companies and the reels and sponsorships and stuff. It used to be, you'd pick the guys that they were known because they were doing it. They were actually doing it. I can think of a lot of guys like that, just in the saltwater realm. I mean, names that everybody knows, back in the day. Now, you look at guys like Andy Mill or the late Jose Wahebe, there's, those guys are, pioneers. They did it, they made it happen. And those were the big wheels back then. And now the big wheels seem to be on a social media site or because they have 5 million or 1 million viewers, and that's where it's gone. Hell, let's just look at Bud Light, for example. I mean, it's where it's gone.
That's fair.
Fair. I mean, so a lot of the interest in a lot of those events is gone, and it's a shame because there's some really a lot of just incredible people and casters out there that I can come up with that obviously you say Steve Ray Jeff, everybody knows that, but I mean. There's I could roll off plenty of other names of guys who have put in tons of time that are phenomenal casters and fishermen and they just you don't really hear about them and probably won't now because a lot of that stuff's gone by the wayside because it's become more important to your online presence and I think Steve Ray Jeff said it best one time when I was sitting at dinner with him, and I think my question was, I look at all the people that are writing books, and they're not the ones that I want to read. Why haven't you written a book? And he just looked at me and said, because I've got nothing new to say. And I think that's, that's kind of it. There's just the people that really ought to be, the ones that you want to hear from that are just like, man, I've got nothing new. I've been doing it this long, and if that's
just kept it simple and
and just did it, and it is what it is, these days, and I think it's I think even it's kind of slipped into guiding now. Honestly,
That's absolutely fair.
It's gotten to where your online presence is actually more important than how long or your abilities or how much time you've put into it. Someone who comes in who knows how to market, who knows how to use technology, can come in and appear to know and be better than a guy who's been doing it for 30 years. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but it's just, but that's been the way it seems that everything has gone. Obviously, it's not just fly fishing or guiding or casting. It's kind of that way across the board.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time. It really is. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want to end this with one more point or one more topic. I want you to describe the perfect fly cast from your best knowledge, how it's supposed to start, what it's supposed to feel like. Basically, break it down.
Good Lord, I don't know how you
I don't want to put you in the hot seat like that, but I really have to.
I mean, I really don't know how you could describe that, because you can't describe the feeling, because you know it when it's there, when it's happened, before it even the loop goes beyond the tip forward. You already know what that feeling is. I wouldn't be able to, there's no description for it. That's why I practiced 2 hours a night for almost freaking 12, 15 years. There's no way to wrap that up and say what the perfect cast would be. I mean, I could tell you what it might look like. I mean,
break it down. What it might look like.
The perfect cast would be a bottom leg that's, 6 inches lower than the top leg of the loop. The whole loop looks like that, except maybe near the tip. Maybe it's a little wider.
But hold on. How do you achieve such a tight loop from a 180 casting style?
Well, that's kind of the point. You really can't. I mean, you can't. And therein lies the problem why it's, the perfect loop. So that will never be achieved, because if you want to throw a 90-foot back cast, 95-foot back cast, the energy required and the amount of load you put in that rod, that tip, there's going to be, some deflection, that's going to pull that lower leg down. And, so what I would try to do, not get too technical about it, is, the 180 degree, obviously, when you're throwing your loop first, 180 degrees does not mean that you're finishing your back cast, or the stop on your back cast is not at 180 degrees. You have a high stop and you would drift backwards into that 180 degree position. But the lower leg is still connected to your rod tip.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dropping that back cast, drifting, if you will, in that 180 degree position, obviously, if the lower leg's still connected to your rod, then it's going to pull that down. And so you could technically pick your hand straight up over your head and still have that tip laid flat at 180 degrees to keep that lower leg up closer to the top leg of the loop, on the way back through. But, that's what I was saying. The perfect cast is just that, the perfect cast, because I can't throw it. And I don't know, if anyone can. I suppose technically another way to think about it is you could make this perfect 6-inch loop and keep your tip up high and shoot a hell of a lot of line, into that back cast. And and not being anywhere near that 180-degree casting style, and somehow, and pull that same loop off. And I think the closest I've probably ever seen to doing that would probably be Steve, because he has a more condensed style. But even he, when you look at him on slow motion, see people are like, no, he's not, he doesn't lay his rod as far back. He still has a pretty good drift. But he ends up doing it more with his wrist, more so than his arm being laid back. If you look at it in slow motion, definitely nothing is obvious is the way I throw. And I have messed around a lot with throwing with his style, and it's extremely efficient. Definitely closer related to something you would use in a typical fishing situation, in my opinion, than how I might throw in a tournament. Because obviously, if I'm standing on a boat, I'm probably not going to be throwing like that. But again, we're not trying to throw 5-weight 140 feet either. So the perfect cast. I mean, technically speaking, that's what I would call it. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you how to achieve it, because that would mean I could probably I could probably do it. I can't. But I would say that would be for me, the perfect cast would be one where that bottom top leg are parallel all the way to a perfectly curved leading edge of the loop, maybe pointed. There's still arguments about that, about which one is more energy efficient. I would lean towards pointed. Steve throws more of a rounded edge loop. And so kind of hard to, you could, that might be the only point where some people might say, well, I'd like the leading edge to be round. I personally prefer a V shape, because to me, it's more like a bullet, but, but being that, I mean, I'd love to see a 90-foot back cast that's just completely symmetrical, all the way. Well, I mean, symmetrical up to the loop, up to the leading edge of the loop. But that would be the perfect cast to me. And but then it also have to not collapse. That's the other thing that tends to happen on a forward cast like
my
that.
Specialty, right there.
No, not even. I mean, even a perfect cast. I mean, we've done videos on some of the casts that I was rolling out, at high elevation. We're doing video of it, and they would get down and condense so small that the leader would end up running along the fly line, not dipping beneath it. I'm not talking about a tail. It was just condensing down at the very end to a point to where it was just getting so small before it turned over that it would rub along the line before it,
like a teardrop kind of
straightened or didn't straighten. I mean, sometimes it couldn't come off of it, but technically it wasn't down below. It wasn't dipping below and coming back up like a true tail. It was actually just kind of rubbing along. And it was an interesting thing, because I hadn't really ever looked at it like that. And I believe it was a really great caster from California, Ian Walker, that noticed that. And it was really interesting when we started videotape that, going, so maybe sometimes a little more open loop is
beneficial
out at some of those longer distances. So,
Okay. Well,
but anyhow,
I mean, it's no mystery to anyone who fishes with me that I talk about you quite a lot. You are probably one of the main catalysts in my entire fishing journey. So just being able to sit down and do this with you is absolutely fucking amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. It's obviously debatable, but I appreciate it.
Not debatable. I'm telling you right now, it's fact. But yeah, I mean, I genuinely cannot thank you enough for sitting down and doing this, and like just being a part of like my fishing since the first time you and I were fished together on my birthday, where it was blowing like 32 miles an hour.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah, and it was the first time I'd ever had anyone tell me, you know what, today was so bad that it doesn't represent the kind of fishing that we could do. So whenever I have a free day, just let me know and we'll do one. like we'll do one on the house just because you didn't actually get to experience it. So that, I guess that was a big indicator that like you definitely were in it because you enjoyed all of it. And again, I can't thank you enough for all the help you've given me over the years in regards to the fishing, but as well the casting. I mean, there are some days where you and I, sure, we catch fish, but we spend more time going back and forth over just the casting, and then you break down the fundamentals, the physics behind it. So to me, again, I mean, I can't express enough gratitude, because I feel like it has put me in a position where I can fish at a higher level than if I was to do this on my own. So again, yeah, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
My pleasure.